शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः.
Before we begin the text, I shall try to explain a few important points that were raised by one of our senior Swamijis. So that is about Shankaracharya's contribution to ritualistic worship and a general review of his important works. So his most significant contributions to non-philosophical aspect of Hindu religion is the founding of, or rather this unique mechanism that is set in motion is called Shanmata and Panchadevata Puja and his great devotion classics. Now in the Vedic tradition, especially in Rig Veda, you read about a number of devas and devatas, gods and goddesses, Indra, Varuna, Agni, Deva, Prithivi, Matarishwa, Rudra, and so on you find. And sometimes some gods, devatas are conceived to be rivers even. So Imamme, Gange, Yamune, Saraswati. You find Saraswati Suktam is interpreted by some pre-Shankarite commentators as a hymn in praise of the river Saraswati and also as goddess Saraswati. So anyway, that's a different matter. Now Shankaracharya brought this Vedic concept of Devata Puja or Devata Sankalpa, as we call the conception of different deities, into popular worship. That is, I mean how a society practices the ritualistic worship. So he established Shanmata, that is Shaivam cha Vaishnavam Shaktam Sauram Vainayakam Tatha Skantam cha Bhakti Margasya Darshanani Shadevati. So Bhakti Marga meant for ritualistic worship. He established this concept of 6 devotional movements: Shakta, Vaishnava, Shaiva, Saura, that is the worship of Surya, which is not very popular to this day, but there was a time when Surya was considered to be a big deity. There were just a few temples in India, but Vainayaka, Skanda, all these, the other 5 deities are still being worshipped in India. That is Shaiva, Vaishnava, Shakta, Vainayaka and Skanda. So that is Shiva, Vishnu, Devi, different aspects of Devi. So you can find the evolution of Devi Sankalpa from Rigvediya Devi Sukta to this Saundarya Lahari, Ananda Lahari, where a Devata, a Vedic concept of deity Devata is brought down to the level of an anthropomorphic goddess. So anthropomorphism means giving a human dimension to a deity. Now this is a great contribution, because there were so many, maybe hundreds of Devata Sankalpas during the Vedic times. She coordinated and synchronized, harmonized them all into 6 movements, of which only the Saura tradition has become extinct. The other 5 traditions still continue and still prosper. The second contribution was Panchadevata Puja, where every household has to worship these 5 devas or devatas. Now you'll be surprised, many of the greatest hardcore, rigid, post-Shankarite dialecticians of Advaita tradition, like Khandana Khanda Khadya. That's a book itself means, somebody or something who eats all the negative arguments. That is the English translation of the Khandana Khanda Khadya, said Srikasha. And he was himself a great devotee. Ishvara Deva Pumsam Advaita Vasana. This is the Mangalacharanam in Khandana Khanda Khadya, and is attributed to Sriharsha, though it comes in other books also as Mangalacharana. And also all the great Madhusudana Saraswati, Advaita Siddhi, the most significant Vada Grantha dialectical work during the post-Shankarite period. He was a great devotee of Krishna. And also Chitsugacharya, Ananda Bodha, all these great post-Shankarite dialecticians who actually waged a dialectical warfare with the Madhvas. They were all great devotees and they were all practitioners of this Panchadevata Puja. So you find Adityam Bigam Vishnum Gananatham Maheshwaram Panchayajnavaro Nityam Grihastha Panchapujayi. So every Grihastha, every householder should have a place in his worship room and should have some images of this. Aditya, Ambika, that is Surya, and Devi, Vishnu, Ganesha, and Maheshwara, Shiva. So this Pancha Yajna means Pancha Devata Puja was a unique contribution that Shankaracharya made towards Vedic tradition, and it is something very, very unique in many ways, because if you had not done this, Advaita tradition would have become a rigid intellectual concept. So today you have to be very careful, do not mistake me, but today there are many Advaitins who tell you, oh, Shankaracharya was a philosopher, so he could not have written this devotional hymn. So you find in Oriental conferences, of which I was a life member for several years, they present an original paper. That's a condition every year, for every conference, maybe 1/4 of a year. And then they will present some kind of obscure paper, mostly without reading Shankaracharya's original books. They say, or maybe Vivekananda is not Shankaracharya's work, because he was a great hardcore intellectual. So Vivekananda is a simple introductory work. Or maybe Subramanya Bhujangam, Shivananda Lahari, Ananda Lahari. These do not belong to Shankaracharya, because he was a philosopher. Now, this is actually, if you don't mind, it is because of the Western intellectual influence. Because in Kantian tradition or in Western idealistic tradition, if you are an idealistic philosopher, then you should have no respect for anything else. If you are a philosopher, dialectician, then you should not care for rituals. So if you belong to one tradition, you should negate everything else. This is the Western idea. But very often Indian philosophers and Sanskritists, influenced by this Western trend, they present papers saying that Shankaracharya could not have written this devotional hymn. As I mentioned earlier, neither Madhva, nor Vallabha, nor even Chaitanya or Ramanuja could write a single sloka comparable to the devotional hymns of Shankaracharya. Even if in matters in terms of pure devotion, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could not have written anything comparable to Ananda Lahari, Shivananda Lahari, Subramanya Bhujangam, or Vishnu Shatpadi, or anything like that. So in Shankara, you find the highest devotee and also the highest philosopher. Now, just a few, I mentioned this ritualistic worship. Two important books are well known. One is Saparya Hridaya, which they say the original text was not found, but recently it was discovered by a prominent Sanskritist. The other one is Prapanchasara. It deals with ritualistic worship. Saparya Hridaya is a book on the philosophy of ritualistic worship, gods and goddesses. Saparya itself means puja. And Prapanchasara is also an important book in Tantra Shastra and Mantra Shastra. And as for other works, well, you can do Shiva Stotra. You know, Sri Shiva Pradasmarana Stotram, Shiva Bhujangam, Shivananda Legari, Shiva Padadi Keshanda Varana Stotram, Shiva Keshadi Padanda Varana Stotra, again Vedasara Shiva Stotram, Shiva Parada Kshamavana Stotram. Well, the list is endless. Almost more than 70 devotional hymns are attributed to Shankara. And if you have any doubt about the loyalty to Advaita philosophy, in each and every one of these devotional hymns, you find a sublime Advaitic twist to the end of the stotra. So from, as Swamiji said, you know, we all begin with Dvaita and we pass through Visishta Advaita and reach Advaita. So you find in these devotional hymns, you find there is a dualistic beginning and there is an evolution through Visishta Advaita and there is a culmination in Advaita. The Devi Stotra, Saundari Lekhari, Devi Bhujanga Stotram, Ananda Lekhari, and so on. Tribhura Sundari, Manasa Puja Stotram, Vaishnava Stotras. There are so many Vishnu Shatpadi, Vishnu Bhujanga Prayadam, Vishnu Padadi Keshanta Stotram, and so on. Even Hanumat Pancharatna, Nadi Stotras, and Stalamahatma Stotras, you know, Manigarnigashtakam, and Sri Vishwanath Nagari Stotram, all that you find. So what I mean to say, and again, for pure worship, is a Nirguna Manasa Puja. So you find, well, the most celebrated work of Shankaracharya in pure ritualistic worship is these Ushasima Gudha Mangala, it begins like that. That is 64 Chadushashti Kala Puja Stotram, where Shankaracharya elaborates 64 acharas, 64 Chadushashti Pujara Puja Stotram, 64 acharas. So 64 acharas reduced to 16 acharas, reduced to 10 acharas, reduced to Panchopachara. So Panchopachara, Deshopachara, and then 64 upacharas. So this is another important work. So you begin your worship by praying, invoking the deity to be present in your heart. Then you present Arghya, Padya, Diba, Dhuba, Diba, and so on. All these are elaborated in this particular Chadushashti Puja Stotra. So anyway, that's a very important subject because that will give us a proper understanding of what Mandukya means. Because in Mandukya Karika, you don't find any direct reference to rituals. But to understand the true implication of Turiya, we must have already gone through these disciplines so that our mind is ready, and such a mind will not interpret Advaita as a pure life negating, reality negating intellectual construct. They will understand Advaita as a holistic system of philosophy and a way of life and a state of spiritual experience. So that's why, as a philosophy, Advaita is the essence of Vedantic literature. As an experience, it is the ultimate reach of spiritual evolution. Anyway, this is by way of introduction. Now we'll come to the text proper. Thank you. So now we will begin the text. I think we stopped somewhere just before the beginning of the 13th Karika. Dvaidasya agrahanam tulyam upayohu prajna turyayohu. Vijanidra yuda prajnaha saja turyena vidyate. So this particular Karika as a background, because a doubt may arise, because Dvaida Agrahana is, that means the absence of Dvaida, absence of Anyatha Grahana is common, or the absence of even Agrahana is common in the Vishwa and Taijasa. And in Turiya and Prajna, there is the absence of experiencing plurality, because in Prajna state, you don't see anything. In Turiya state also, you don't see anything. Then why do you argue that Karana Baddhatvam, that is that is called Bijatvam, is applicable only to Prajna and not to Turiya? I shall try to make this point clear. Why Karana Baddhatvam? Karana means causal form. Prajna is called causal form because Prajna is the essence of Agrahana, Tattva Agrahana. Tattva Agrahana, the absence of understanding reality, is the essence of Prajna state, Susutti state. In Jagrat state and Swapna state, there is Agrahana, but there is also Anyatha Agrahana. There is the absence of apprehension, and there is also wrong apprehension, Anyatha Agrahana. You see different objects, so you mistake one for the other. Now, the question arises, Vedantists argue that in Prajna state, there is Karana Buddhatvam. Karana Buddhatvam means it is bound by being the cause of Jagrat and Swapna. Why? Because in Prajna state, there is Agrahana. Agrahana means the absence of proper understanding, absence of recognition of the reality. That is the state of Prajna state. But there is no Dvaida experience because you don't see anything. There is no Anyatha Grahana. But Anyatha Grahana can originate only from Agrahana. That means if you don't see the rope properly, then only from the absence of the ability to recognize the rope, that is Agrahana, from that emerges the problem of mistaking the rope for many other things, snake, etc. So Anyatha Grahanam emerges from Agrahana. So Agrahana has got the causal form, is called Bija Bhava. Bija means seed. From seed, the plant, the tree emerges. So the Sushupti, the Prajna state, is the seed, Agrahana. And from that, Anyatha Grahana emerges. So normally we interpret like this: Prajna is causal form, and Swapna and Jagrat constitute the effect. Now the question arises: why this causality is found only in Prajna state and not in Turiya state, though in Turiya and Prajna state there is no recognition, there is no misapprehension, there is no Anyatha Grahana. So why can't you say they are the same? So that is the argument. So you can see Nimitantara Prapta Ashanga Nivrutyartho Ayam Sloka. This particular sloka is to address this problem, to address this doubt. What is the doubt? In Prajna and Turiya, Dvaida Agrahanam, that means the apprehension of duality is the same. When you reach the Turiya state, you don't see Dvaita. In Sushupti also, you don't see Dvaita because there is only Agrahanam. So why don't you say they are the same? And then you argue that the in Turiya there is no causality, there is no Bija Bhava, only Sushupti. In Prajna there is Bija Bhava. So that problem is raised. So Katham Dvaita Agrahanasya Tulyatve, or Tulyatva, two part of Vedas. Dvaita Agrahanatvam is common, Tulya means the same, without any distinction, it is identical, same. Both in Prajna and Turiya. Prajnasyava na Turiyasya iti prapta ashanka nivartyate. So this ashanka, this doubt, this possible question is addressed in the coming verses. So Nimitantra Prapta. Nimitantra here means we were listening to all this, we were discussing this important subject, saying that in Jagrana and Swapna there is Anyata Grahana, there is Prajna, there is only Agrahana, and Prajna there is Bija Bhava, because from Prajna state Jagrana and Swapna emerges. So that is Nimitantra. That is our samskaras, vasanas. When we listen to this, all these doubts may arise. Prapta ashanka nivartyatho ayam sloka katam dvida grahanasya tulyatve karanabaddhutvam. Karanabaddhutvam means ajnana. That is why ajnanam, though absent both in Turiya and Prajna, why do you say that there is karanabaddhutvam only in Prajna, not in Turiya? So that question is being discussed in the coming Bhashya. Yasmat Vijanidhrayutaha. Yasmat, this begins the explanation. Vijanidhrayutaha, that is Prajna state. It is endowed with Nidra, endowed with deep sleep. Tattva Pradibodhu Nidra. Tattva Pradibodha, that is absence of understanding the reality, absence of the awareness of reality. Now we should remember Nidra here always should be understood as Tattva Pradibodha. Nidra need not necessarily mean sleep as we understand the physical sense. So Nidra means Tattva Pradibodha. That is Agrahana, absence of recognition of the reality, absence of awareness of reality. It is actually common in all the three states. So that is an important point. In Jagrana state also you are sleeping. So that is a subject we are going to discuss. In waking state also actually you are asleep. In what sense? You are not aware of your true reality, your true spiritual identity. So long as we mistake ourselves to be this body, mind, senses, indriyas, etc., all these anyatha grahana is a result of agrahana. So in fact, we are not aware. We are not aware of our true reality. And that tattva pradibodha state is called nidra. Nidra, it doesn't mean going to sleep here. Even in waking state, we are walking the street, we are reading a book, we are actually sleeping. So if you read the next Karika, that is Anadi Maya Sukto Yeda Jiva Prabudhyade Ajam Anidram Aswapnam Advaidam Buddhyade Tatha. That you find here in the picture. Anadi Maya Sukta. That is the 16th Karika. I mean, you are sleeping under the influence of this Maya, this avidya, this absence of awareness, which is anadi, which is beginningless. Yada jiva prabuddhyate. Then that jiva suddenly wakes up. That waking up doesn't mean getting up in the morning. Actually, when you wake up in the morning, you are not waking into awareness. That waking up in the morning takes place in sleep only. So in that sense, When we walk in the street, when we eat food, when we discuss, we are still asleep. That sleep is meant here. That sleep means tattva apradibodha, tattva agrahana. That is, so long as we are not aware of our true spiritual identity, our turiya state, we are sleeping. That is the meaning of anadi maya supta. Ajam, anidram, asopnam, advaidam, buddhidekada. That advaita is turiya. So real waking up happens when we wake up to the reality of our understanding, of our true nature. That is when we are turiya. The turiya adhigama, as is called in this turiya adhigama, means our awareness of our turiya identity. We are Atman. That awareness is the only waking up. Otherwise, even in the Jagrata state, we are still asleep spiritually. In a spiritual sense, we are asleep. That's the meaning. So, Swapna Jagrata Yoho Anyatha, sorry, this is beginning. Next one. Yasmat Bija Nidra Yudaha Tattva Pradibodho Nidra. So, what is Nidra? Nidra is nothing but Tattva Pradibodha. In that sense, in Swapna state also we are sleeping. In Jagrata state also we are sleeping. Even when we are in waking state, we are deep asleep because we are not aware of our true identity. So also when you are dreaming, we are deep asleep. Saiva cha Vishesha Pradibodha Prasavasya Bijam. Sa evacha Vishesha Pradibodhasya Pradibodha Prasavasya Bijam. Vishesha Pradibodha means here Jagrata Swapna state. That is which are characterized by agrahana and anyatha grahana. So agrahana is the cause of anyatha grahana. And anyatha grahana exists only in Jagrata state and Swapna state. In Sushupti state, there is only agrahana. And agrahana, as I mentioned, is the bija. Without the seed, there cannot be plant. So without bija, there cannot be angura. So without agrahana, there cannot be anyatha grahana. Without prajna, there cannot be vishwa and taijasa. Without sushupti, there cannot be waking state. That means Jagrata state and Swapna state. So that nidra is the bijam, is the cause. Vishesha Pradibodha. Vishesha Pradibodha means that state of awareness where you see different things distinctly, which means anyatha grahana. That's the idea behind it. And of course, anyatha grahana that is applicable to Swapna also. Sa bija nidra, that is the bija nidra. So nidra is very distinct, very clear in Sushupti, but in Jagrata state and Swapna state, the nidra is not very clear. That's because of anyatha grahana. In waking state and in dream state, we are seeing so many different things. So we are not aware of our absence of awareness of the absolute reality. The absence of the awareness of the absolute reality becomes distinct in Sushupti, but not distinct in Swapna and Jagrata, because in Swapna and Jagrata we see different things. So anyatha grahana is more prominent in Swapna and Jagrata, and agrahana is more prominent in Sushupti. That's why sa bija nidra taya yutaha prajna. So bija nidra yuta prajna, that particular karika is being expounded here. Prajna. Sada sarvadruk subhavatvat tattva pradibodha lakshana bija nidra turye na vidyate. So why this tattva pradibodha lakshana bija nidra? Why this particular state of causality that is Sushupti, this Agrahana is absent in Turiya. The reason is Sada Sarvadrik. It is present in waking state, in dream state, and deep sleep state. So you cannot see any distinction. As I mentioned earlier, when there is sunlight, you cannot use a torch to recognize sunlight, because sunlight is omnipresent light. So again, the flame of the spark of the blazing fire all constitute fire. So this Turiya is Sarvadrik. It is present in waking state, in dream state, and deep sleep state. Sada here means Trishu Avastha. So that's the meaning. 3 states of awareness. That is Avastha. So the reason is because it's Sada Sarvadrik Subhavatva. And the Sarvadrik, that the all-seeing, omniscient reality, that Sarvadrik, that is its essential nature. It is not something that it acquires. It is Susyabhava, its own original Surupa. And it is present in all the 3 states. Therefore, there is no Tattva Agrahana in Turiya. There is Tattva Agrahana only in Prajna state. I mean, without Tattva Anyatha Grahana. Tattva Grahana is present in all the 3 states. But the difference, as I mentioned earlier, is in Prajna Sushupti state, there is no Anyatha Grahana, there is only Agrahana. And that is absent in Turiya. The reason is Sada Sarvadrik Subhavatva. Tattva Pradibodha Lakshana Bija Nidra Turyena Vidyati. Ataha na Karana Baddhaha Tasmin iti Abhipraya. Therefore, there is no Karana Baddhatvam. So Karana Baddhatvam, that should be understood. Karana means cause. Why Prajna is called Karana? Because in Prajna there is Agrahana. That is the absence of awareness of the reality. And that is the real cause of Anyatha Grahana. Misapprehension happens only when there is no real apprehension. So, in all the 3 stages, Tattva Agrahana is there, but in Sushupti state, there is no Anyatha Grahana. And there is Anyatha Grahana only in Jagrata state and Swapna state. So Sushupti has the quality of being the Bija, the seed, the cause, the origin. That's idea. Turiya is Sarvadrik, and it is a substratum. It is the Adhara of all the 3 states. In Jagrata and Swapna state, this Nidra, this deep sleep, Agrahana is not spashtam, is not distinct. Why? Because there is misapprehension and Nidhagrahana, that is distinct. In Sushupti state, there is no Nidhagrahana, therefore Agrahana is distinct. Next one is Swapna Nidra Yuto Adyu Prajnastu Aswapna Nidraya Nanidram Naiva Chat Swapnam Turye Pashyanti Nischitaha. So this Nischitaha is very important word here that we'll discuss later. It's being discussed the coming Karika also. The person who has really experienced his identity with Turiya, that person is called Nischita. And we discussed later a person who has completely overcome all doubts, conflicts, or misunderstandings, all Brahma, Avidya, all completely gone. Such a person, such a Jnani or Jivan Mukta is called Nischita. I mean, a person who has got Nischaya, correct understanding, this idea behind here. So, Swapna Nidra Yuto Adyo, prajnastu aswapna nidraya nanidram naiva cha swapnam tulye pasyanti nischita. The Bhashya comes here now. Swapna anyatha grahanam sarpa iva rajvam. So, what is swapna? Sarpa iva rajvam. So, swapna is seeing something in place of the reality. That will be called viparyasa in the coming thing. And its most prominent quality is anyatha grahanam. Swapna anyatha grahanam. Sarpa iva rajva. Nidrokta. So what is swapna? Swapna is nothing but mistaking something for something else. Just as we mistake rajju for sarpa, sarpa iva rajva, nidrokta. Tattva apradibodhalakshanam tamaidi. And what is tama here? Tattva apradibodhalakshanam. Here, tama doesn't mean what we normally understand, darkness, which may be associated with the presence of light. When there is a light, when you move away from the light, there is absence of that light, and the absence of that light is called tama or darkness. Here, tama here means avidya, which is anirvachaniya. It is called tattva pradibodha. So that is the important point. Remember, that's why tattva pradibodhalakshanam tama iti. What is nidra? Nidra is darkness. What is darkness? Darkness is not just a relative absence of light. It is avidya. It is tattva pradibodha. It is what we understand to be the absence of reality, or absence of the understanding of reality. Tabhyam swapnanidrabhyam yuto vishatayaso. Now, this Jagrat and Swapna state are characterized by this Tattva Padibodha and Anyatha Grahana. So, that is an important point. Nidra here should not be mistaken to be what we normally mean by the word in the dictionary. We mean sleep. That is not what is meant by here, by the word nidra. Nidra means tattva pradibodha. And that nidra is always present. That nidra is always present even in our Jagrat state, empirical Jagrat state. That means the empirical sense, Jagrat state is waking state, where we see different things, we associate different things. That association, which is characterized by anyatha grahana, even in waking state, even in broad light, that takes place in sleep. So that is the real meaning of nidra here. And that is called bija nidra. The prajna is called bija nidra. So Jagrat Swapna state also is associated with a kind of nidra. That is ordinary nidra. That is real biological sleep, physical sleep. We wake up, go back to sleep again, and wake up. All this happens. But prajna is called bija nidra. That because that nidra contains a seed of Jagrat and Swapna. Tabhyam Swapna nidrabhyam yuto vishwadayaso. That's very clear. This Swapna is associated with Taijasa and Jagrat is associated with Vishwa. And in both these stages, there is Agrahana and Anyatha Grahana. Yuto vishwadayaso. Ataha tau karyakarana baddho ityukto. Therefore, tau means Agrahana and Anyatha Grahana is both are bound by karya and karana. Ityukto. And Agrahana is karana and Anyatha Grahana is karya. Agrahana is the cause and Anidhagrahana is the effect. Prajnastu Swapnavarjitaya Kevalaya Eva Nidraya Yuta Idi Karanabadha Ityuktam. Prajna is Swapnavarjitaya Nidraya means that Nidra that you find in Prajna is Swapnavarjita, means there is no Swapna there. There is no Anidhagrahana. To have Swapna, to have dream, you should have this Anidhagrahana, mistaking one for the other. That is totally absent in Swapna. So, it doesn't exist in Prajna. Now, Bhayam Pashyandi Turiye Nischita. So, Karyabandhanam and Karanabandhanam. Bondage of Karya, bondage of Anidhagrahana, and Karanabandhatam, bondage of Agrahana, both are absent in Turiya. Turiya Nischitaha, Nischita means Brahmavida. So that is a technical word here. Nischita here means those who reach the level. So the Nischita will be understood in the context of Viparyasa that is discussed in the coming Karika. Karanabandhatyuktam. Now, Bhayam Pashyandi Turiye Nischitaha Brahmavida Ityarthaha. Viruddhatvat. Why? Savitari iva tamaha. Now, Ubhayam means Karanabandhatvam and Karyabandhatvam. That is Agrahana and Anyathagrahana. They are totally absent in Turiya. Turiya na Pashyandi. It's not seen in Turiya. Why? Viruddhatvat? Because it is just opposite of Turiya. Turiya is like sunlight, it is everywhere, omnipresent everywhere. So you cannot have any patches of darkness here and there. It is omnipresent everywhere. And it is present in all the three states. And also we discussed earlier in this Turiya, which is Turiya Adhigama, which is compared to sun. So in sun, there is no Aprakasanam and there is no Anyatha Prakasana. Aprakasana means Viruddha means darkness. There is no darkness in sunlight. And also, there is no question of something else enlightening sunlight. So you don't require a torch to recognize sun. So torch, if torch were required, then it could be called Nidha Prakash. Nothing else can become effulgent because sun is the very essence of effulgence. Similarly, because this light is this Swabhava, it is the essential characteristic of sun, there cannot be darkness in sun. That's why Viruddhatvad Savitari iva tamaha. So there cannot be tama, darkness, in Savitari, in sun. Ataha na karya karana baddha ityukta sturiyaha. So that is the Karika Bhashya. Ataha na karya karana baddha ityukta turiya. Therefore, turiya is not bound by either Nidhagrahana or Agrahana. That's the idea behind here. So, Nidhagrahana will be discussed really. What is Nidhagrahana? Seeing something as diverse or seeing diversity. That is seeing plurality, seeing something else, seeing multiplicity. All these are the characteristics of Nidhagrahana. So here question may arise, what about a Jivan Mukta? What about the person who has become the Nischita, means Brahmavitaha? They also go to sleep, physical sense. But even in their sleep, they don't lose their awareness of their true identity with Turiya. So their waking state, deep sleep state, their Sushupti state, Swapna state, all happen in awareness. For those who have not reached that state of spiritual realization, those who are not Brahmajnanis, for them, their Jagra state, Swapna state, Sushupti state, all happen in this Nidra, in this sleep only. So sleep, Nidra, spiritual sleep, that's meaning. It is all pervading in waking state, in dream state, in deep sleep state, for the Ajnanis, for those who are not aware of their true identity, spiritual identity. Those who have become Jivan Muktas, those who are liberated, those who have reached their Brahmajnanam, attained Brahmajnanam, for them, even their sleep happens in awareness. What is the awareness? The real waking state. The real waking state is awakening to our own spiritual identity. So that again will be discussed. Anadimaya Sukto Yada Jiva Prabhuddhite. So that is the waking up, which is meant by waking up to our own Turiya identity. Kada Turiye Nishchido Bhavadi Tichade. So when do we become established in our Turiya identity? That is being discussed here. Anyatha Grihnada Sukno Nidra Tattum Ajanataha Vivarya Se Tayo Kshini Turiyam Padamasnude. So Anyatha Grihnada Sukno Nidra Tattum Ajanataha. So those who misunderstand the reality differently, like mistaking the rope for snake, that state, Anidhagrahanam, which is called Viparyasa, when that Viparyasa ceases to exist, when it disappears, when these differences and Anidhagrahana and Agrahana disappear, then one recognizes one's own Turiya identity, Turiya Bhava. Here one word should be understood, Viparyasa. That is a technical word which is coming. So that will be discussed again and again in this subject. So Viparyasa actually means kind of inversion, contrariety, wrong notion, wrong apprehension, erroneous or wrong understanding. And its fundamental characteristic is Anyathagrahanam. Anyathagrahanam, which happens in Jagra state and Swapna state. It is present in Sushupti also, but in Sushupti, the prominence is given to Agrahana. So this is Viparyasa. In fact, it means deviation or not understanding of the absolute reality. And it creates a lot of Brahma, Samsaya, Manovrittis, speculations, doubts, and so on. All these are implied in this particular expression, Viparyasa. So actually means, Asudhadu, two upasargas, V and Pari upasargas, in Pratyaya, so it means change, contrariety, mistaking one for the other, and all the related apprehensions and feelings and conflicts and doubts that will arise in our mind. And this is called Viparyasa. Its fundamental characteristic is Anyathagrahana, which again the result of deviation or not understanding of Tattva. So Tattva Pradibodha is the foundation of this Viparyasa. Just like seeing a snake on the rope. Now, this subject is being discussed here. It's a very well-known subject. So all the mana, chitta, hangara, sankalpa, samsaya, brahma, all these are related to Viparyasa. Swapna Jagritayohu Anyatha Rijwam Sarpavat Grinnadaha Tattum Swapno Bhavati. Let me see. 5 minutes more. So in Swapna state and Jagrat state, we mistake Rijwam Sarpavat Grinnadaha. That is a person who is experiencing Anyatha Grahanam, who mistakes a Rajju for Sarpa, who sees Sarpa in Rajju, a Sarpa which actually doesn't exist, snake which doesn't exist, is seen in Rajju. Now that state is actually a kind of Swapna. Why? Because this happens in ignorance. So mistaking rope for the snake happens in a condition of tattva pradibodha, in a condition of the absence of understanding the absolute reality, in a condition of not being able to recognize the rope for a rope. So you mistake the rope for a snake, a water line, maybe a piece of wood, or maybe a crack on the floor, Jaladhara, Danda, Bhuchidra, Sarpa, and so on. Similarly, in Jagrat state and Swapna state, in waking state and dream state, we recognize ourselves to be so many things other than our true identity. We identify ourselves as Karta, Bhokta. We identify ourselves with what we do, what we experience. We identify ourselves with the Mana, Buddhi, Chitta, Hangara, and so on. So that state is called Viparyasa. Viparyasa happens in all the three states. So this Nishchita means Nishchita state, when you get to Adhigama, when you really understand your true spiritual identity, Turiya identity, when this happens, this Viparyasa completely disappears. So this state, this happens, it is actually kind of Swapna. So in Swapna, we see many things. We don't see the reality. We so many things, one after another comes. Like that, when we are in a state of Tattva Grahana, we see different objects. So it's just like Swapna. Nidra Tattvam Ajanataha. Nidra means deep sleep. It is Tattvam Ajanataha. Trishu Avasthasu Tulya. That is an important point, which I mentioned earlier. Nidra means sleep. The sleep which is characterized by not being able to recognize our true nature. That is Tattva Grahana, it's called, or Tattva Pradibodha, it's called. That is called sleep. That is common. Tulya Trishu Avasthasu. It is common in all the three states of Jagra state, Swapna state, and Susupti state. Tattvam Ajanataha. For a person who is not aware of his true spiritual identity, Nidra Trishu Avasthasu Tulya. The sleep is common in all the three states. So we'll continue in the next session, where the Jivan Mukta will be aware of his true nature in deep sleep. That's the question?
Yes.
Yeah. His deep sleep also happens within his awareness. That is the spiritual awareness. The spiritual awareness never leaves him even in deep sleep. So his deep sleep, in deep sleep also, it never leaves him. So it is a state, it is something that you can understand only when you understand it. So Vedanta tells here, actually our speculations about how it would be when we become Brahmajnani, when we become aware of true nature, that also is a Viparyasa. So Viparyasa, it means all kinds of sankalpas, samsayas, vasanas, doubts, expressions, speculations, questions we may ask. Even the answers to questions also is Viparyasa. Because when there's an answer to a question, that question answer equation happens in nidra, in sleep only. So the real awareness transcends all this. The real answer cannot be explained. So all the empirical answers, you ask a question, you find an answer, that answer can lead to another question. There is no answer at empirical level which is final. That way Shankaracharya himself says, Anubhavavasanatvat Bhudavastu Vishayatvacha Brahma Vijnanasya. So it ends only when you get experience. And that experience is the real answer. And then that answer cannot be put in words. The real answer is actually, the language of the real answer is silence. That's why you can find Antaya, Bahuvadinam, Anantaya, Mukam. All these ideas can be found in the, in fact, this is a mantra from Yajurveda which is chanted in Durga Puja. You find towards the end, you find. You see. It comes in Yajurveda mantra, Antaya, Bahuvadinam, Anantaya, Mukam. I mean, the language of the finite is verbosity, and the language of the infinite is silence. So that is where the Viparyasa disappears. That's why Viparyase tayo kshine. Viparyase kshine. When the Viparyasa becomes weak, disappears, all doubts, all samsayas will vanish. So that's why I mentioned earlier, if you go through this rigid dialectical discussion, one can quickly deviate into some kind of nihilistic idealism. That problem is there. And I cannot personally refer to anybody, but this has happened to many teachers who frequently, they learn a little bit of Advaita, then they reach a kind of a nihilistic or world negating, life negating idealism. That was not Shankaracharya's philosophy. So in Shankaracharya's philosophy, you find a blending of idealism, realism. That's why Raghveshanji Maharaj put a very question. He said this, Shankaracharya's ritualistic worship, stotras and all. People do not really understand the meaning. There is a complete edifice of spiritual journey for rituals, devotional hymns, practices, and the highest spiritual idealism. Without this highest spiritual idealism, ritualism can become fanaticism. That's a danger. Actually, why Advaita helps you, at least even if you don't consider yourself to be a follower of Advaita philosophy, still reading of Advaita will save you from fanaticism, because bhakti or devotion without some degree of spiritual idealism, philosophical idealism, can lead to cult formations of fanaticism. That is because that's why, for example, there is Savitari Tamah, I mean, in sunlight, there is no darkness. You're searching darkness, then searching it in sun, you don't find it. So sunlight is omnipresent. Like that, in everything there is the presence of the Turiya. So even in ritualistic worship also, if a person completely concentrates even in the ritualistic puja, that can train his mind, that can prepare his mind for a correct understanding of Turiya. Because mind has to be trained, and mind needs training at its level. So Advaita level. So mind becomes pure and ready and gets prepared for the highest spiritual idealism. That's why this puja all is mentioned here. Many pujas many stotras, Shankaracharya seems you find, it begins some kind of invocation, avahana, all that we find. So, mother, please wake up in the morning. Jadidi Jagridi. That's how we begin Devyavara. That is Chadushashti Upajara Puja Stotram is called. Chadushashti Upajara Puja Stotram. A stotram that describes 64 upacharas. That is a real elaborate one. Now, there, the priest, the pujari, the worshipper, he begins his upacharas. In the morning, she wakes up, mother. The all-pervading divine energy is invoked to be present on the image, the photo that is in front of him. Not that image is not God or goddess. The photo, the picture is not goddess. But the real divinity is present, is invoked by the devotees, by the worshippers' concentration, pure devotion. The divine principle, divine reality is present on that image. And then he invokes the presence of the divine reality on the image, then he worships, then he does. And finally, Uttame Shigare, you can find the Gayatri. Gayatri is asked in the evening, Sandhya Gayatri is asked, Uttame Shigare Devi, you go back to the mountain abode, finally. So anyway, so that's why the Advaita reality can be understood only in the background of all these details. Because that otherwise you become a kind of dry idealist, life-negating idealist, which is the opposite of Advaita. Okay.